I'm going to be covering the Agile Change Agent and the Agile Change Coach qualifications. Just to give you some idea about why I'm perhaps the person who can do this, is that I wrote this, the Agile Change Management Handbook, it's published in 2014, the first one. And then I was asked to do the second edition during 2020. It was published in 2021. So not only am I the author, but I'm also the chief examiner for the two certifications that I'm going to be talking about today. If you were with me last week, you'll know that I tried to find a way to talk about change qualifications that was relevant. And we recognise that some of you want to gain a qualification that evidences knowledge and experience. And we're also making sure that we recognise that for all of us, we really do need now qualifications and courses that cover multiple simultaneous change. You can't just talk about one individual change anymore. And what we said was that the Agile Change was really covering multiple simultaneous change, but also the kind of courses that give you techniques that enable you to hit the ground running. So that was the context in which we start today. So sometimes it helps to understand an origin story, so you understand why is the course what it is. And my origins were around 2008, working with clients, a lot of whom were moving their IT development, sometimes their marketing, across to a more agile way of doing things. And so as a result, I ended up taking things like the Scaled Agile Framework certification, large scale Scrum. I did the Agile PM qualification from the Agile Business Consortium. Before it was called the Agile Business Consortium, because I remember sitting in the taxi with their CEO of the time and said, why are you called the DSDM Consortium? Nobody knows that that means Dynamic Systems Development Model. And the fact is that there's no Agile in your title. You're mad. And so the next year they did rename it. So I think I'll take credit for that one. I also did things like the Certified Scrum Master, Certified Product Owner. And really, I started to get kind of concerned, not only from the qualifications I was taking, but the experience my clients were having. These methods were great on the focus of tangible delivery. So if I did want some kind of IT development, it was great. They would add features and functions in a very iterative, incremental way. So using sprints, using a backlog of all the ideas, great techniques for team collaboration and ideas generation. But the focus was very much on here's something else, here's something else. And I felt that my clients who were very much in the business were playing catch up all the time. I still remember he was so angry. Chief Operating Officer who basically suspended all system updates because he basically said, we are seeing a hit on business as usual. Every time something goes live, chaos ensues as people are trying to work out what's going on. So our performance in terms of customer satisfaction, transaction speed goes down. And therefore, and we're seeing this every couple of weeks. This is ridiculous. They will be allowed to go live every 3 months. I don't care how they develop them. They will go live every 3 months. And I still remember how it was just trying to put the brakes on what was seen as incremental was seen as constant disruption. But I think it was because we weren't taking account of the wider picture. A functionality in a system is about working in a different way. And that, for me, was missing from those certifications. And therefore, it led me to the ideas around Agile Change. Something else was happening at the same time. I was also involved with organisations who were saying, maybe culturally we need to shift more to a culture of experimentation. So they started to talk about piloting and prototyping. Remember, this was good 15 years ago. And they were moving off of something I'd had experience of when I was global head of project and programme management for several banks. We worked in a way that we might have 30 or 40 projects within a programme, and that programme would deliver over 2 to 3 years. So we would have sort of 2 or 3 months of massive planning up front, identifying all the projects, and then we would work our way through in very much in a waterfall style, one initiative after another, in a very logical sequence, and we would deliver the complete shift in a couple of years. And it's from that point that people then had to start working in a new way. And of course, until they start working in a new way, you don't get any realization of the benefits. So we would commission expenditure. Several years later, we might start to see some payback. And there was obviously a feeling, good 10 to 15 years ago, that perhaps that was not sustainable. I think that the agile sort of transformations had their moment, and I see a lot less of that now. I don't think that the urge to become faster and more responsive and more customer focused and to continuously learn has gone away. I just think actually it's been rebranded. I think that my clients talk about a culture of innovation, cultures of collaboration. So I still think they are moving that way, but I don't think they use the word agility as much. Forrester came out with some very interesting research last month, which basically said that they surveyed about 3,500 people who said, no, Agile's still on the table. 95% of them said Agile's still on the table. And 58% of the business and the IT professionals they surveyed said that actually Agile is an essential to how they get things done. So I think that there was development of agility. There is this bigger move, the bigger cultural shift to organizational agility. And I felt that agile change sat in the middle. I think there was something that had to glue the two together. And ultimately, it was that focus on adoption, the focus on how do we work differently? So I passionately believe that there was a lot within the agile methodologies we could repurpose, but with that focus on behavior change and getting people to work in new ways. And that should apply to any type of initiative, much, much wider than just IT. I mean, I was working at the time that I started writing the book with an organization that was doing a restructuring. And there's no reason why, in fact, we did do that in a very agile way as we rolled through the organization. So we didn't cause complete chaos right across the organization simultaneously. The other thing that I thought about when I wrote the book was that how important it was to make sure that whatever scale or type or flavor of agility your organization has, within here, there are things that help you adopt that more agile mindset and give you techniques so that you can work in an agile way. Sometimes that connects with people you're working with. Sometimes it flies in the face of how people are working, but it still enables you to get the job done and work incrementally and iteratively without sort of having to say, oh, I'm using this particular method. So I wanted to give you the freedom to be agile. And actually, it's ironic that there are so many methods of agility out there that a colleague of mine at the time, Sam Zawadi, we set up the agnostic agile movement, which has now got massive legs globally. We don't have anything to do with it anymore, but we did have this idea and we did sort of set this up that actually there was something you sort of signed up to, which said, agile is a mindset and a way of doing things. Agile is not a methodology. And I think that very much informs everything that I'm talking about here. As far as the benefits are concerned, a great deal of uncertainty. So the idea that you can plan everything up front just feels laughable these days. The idea that I could plan for the next 3 years with any degree of certainty. And also, I'm being knocked off course, not just by other changes taking place outside the organisation, but the volume of interdependencies and often the negotiation we have to do. I want to change this, but I'm waiting on your input, or I'm not planning to change this for a few months, but you're now waiting for it from me, means that we need a way of simply and visibly showing our plans so that we can have that sort of negotiation. So I think you'll find that the roadmap really does deliver on that promise. Neuroscience certainly proves that it's a brain smart way of working. A couple of things, I do webinars on this, but a couple of things that I draw to your attention. Because we're working in shorter bursts, the brain has to retain a lot less information, and therefore it finds it much easier to process what we're talking about and to concentrate and commit to what we're talking about. So it also sort of reduces the overall pain of change, because we are chunking the change down and we're asking people to focus on something smaller. We're able to prioritize things and work collaboratively to agree the priority for this next chunk, which builds a certain feeling of we're all in this together. It builds a sort of social approach, which gives us that oxytocin, which develops the trust and dependency between us all. So I think I could go on for a good hour about why neuroscience shows that a more agile approach is a smart way of doing things. Increased relevance. I've started to write about this now because my own experience of AI is that we are absolutely at the start of something that's incredibly unknown. We don't even know what the tools are likely to be, let alone what the impacts are going to be. And so, if you like, in a way, it almost feels as if this agile change approach is having yet another resurgence. It was popular before, but now it's becoming an essential, because we are in this world of, well, we're nudging forward with new ways of doing things. There was an interesting article in the FT last week which talked about how organizations might be planning programs of AI launches, but actually we as individuals have picked up and run with it already. And the number of people who are using, whether they're paying for it themselves or not, ChatGPT or maybe Microsoft Copilot to write emails, to prepare presentations, write reports, get answers, is huge. And so I think we're at the start of something that is going to be very uncertain. So an agile approach makes a lot of sense. One of the things that probably gets the most hit rate in the courses is a recognition that if you are working with an organization that isn't working in an agile way, but it's maybe doing a project or a program in a more waterfall way, you can still work incredibly well. Very simple example, working with an organization that's got 18 months to deliver a new HR platform, and that drop dead date is the end of June, whether we like it or not. That doesn't mean to say we're sitting there for 18 months twiddling our thumbs. We can work in an iterative way for all the shifts in the ways of working that we're asking the HR business partners, the operational managers and staff generally, all of whom responsibilities for HR administration, from holidays and sickness, to how we do talent acquisition being shifted to operational managers. All of those shifts can be done even though we've got that sort of waterfall drop dead date where we actually get the system. And that's exactly what we've been doing for a particular client, working incredibly well. So this is applicable whether or not you work in an agile or a more waterfall approach. I think, as I said before, the focus is not just on, hey, we've launched it, we've gone live, but it's on, yes, but how do I use it? How do we change our processes? How do we update people's role descriptions? How do we change our KPIs and our measures of success? How do we change our standards and our policies to reflect how we now work? So I think with Agile Change, it's all about, yes, but how do you change how you work? It's not the delivery of the tangible change itself. And I think, as I've said, there's something about personal power here. Whatever the chaos of change in your organization, you get practical techniques that enable you to just get on with things. You can work incrementally on your own work. You can keep nudging forward, even if you're perhaps waiting on things from other people. Using some of these agile techniques enable you to be more productive and feel more in control, even if there are uncertainties around you. I was particularly asked to highlight by somebody being on the course how important it was for her, that she said the course gives me practical tools on how to more effectively engage with stakeholders. Now, she was on the Agile Change Agent course, and she highlighted the relationship building and the emphasis on empathy and how practically to do that. We all know it's a good idea, but how to do it, and develop her own interpersonal skills. And of course, the Agile Change coach, as I'll show in a moment, very much gives you an even greater number of techniques in that area. And lastly, there's just a feeling that Agile Change perhaps talks to us in terms of the experience we're having at work. And so it's actually very inspiring, it's very motivating, because it provides a fresh perspective on the challenges we're actually having, because we are working in an agile world, formally or informally, and having the techniques to match that is really helpful. I'll quickly just go over 4 design principles that were core to me as I developed both of these courses. Absolutely key to this is the shift from those courses that are very good at telling you what you should do. And there's an awful lot in change management. There's sort of a lot of models that give you a sort of linear move through. You've got to do this, then this, then this, then this. All great stuff, but none of it tells you, but how do I do it? What if my stakeholders are incredibly angry? What if my stakeholders are incredibly fatigued? How do we address these issues? What can you suggest? And I wanted these courses to be full of practical ways forward rather than more of a lecture. At the time, I was training the Change Management Foundation and Practitioner, which is a great foundational course. And there's actually a session on that next week if you want to dive into that, particularly as it's now upgraded to version 3. I'll take you through all of that. But I wanted something that moved us from that sort of 5-day course to something closer to 2 days, which is what I've achieved. At the time, I was working in the Middle East, where people are translating from my English into Arabic, and trying to do that over 5 days is incredibly difficult. And secondly, it was that feeling that actually we are excluding an awful lot of people who do not get given 5 days of training and the money for 5 days of training in any one year. And I think this is more relevant to people. So shorter means more people can attend. And this was pre-pandemic, but wow, it's paid dividends, because it works incredibly well in a virtual situation. Because over 2 days, you can always chunk that up into sort of half days if you're doing an in-house version of the course. Or even I've done it for people like the United Nations in 2-hour stints twice a week over a period of weeks, and it works really well. Learning outcomes deliver ability, not just understanding. And I think that goes back to you walk away able to do something. I know that if I give up even 15 minutes for personal development, I want to be able to go away and do something that I couldn't do before. And that's why there's such a focus on not just practical techniques you can use, but that you can share them with others. They should be intuitive. They should be easy to understand and apply, so that you can go, well, I'm using that, but I can teach somebody else to do it as well. So those were my design principles. Everybody happy with that? Thumbs up if you think I'm making sense, because I'm now going to dive into the content now that you can see the slides. Excellent. Okay, good. Let me know if you've got any questions. I think Miguel's got a question. What's that, Miguel?
Oh, that was accidental. I was going to give a thumbs up.
Oh, that's all right then. Thank you. All right, let's dive into the context. We're halfway through and I'm trying to pick up the speed here. So based on my experience of all the other sort of agile methodologies that are out there, we have to go back to 2001, and there's the Agile Manifesto that talked about the importance of getting stuff done, working together and collaborating, perhaps being responsive, and not being held to account by the plan, being flexible. That isn't to say that we shouldn't document things and that we shouldn't plan things, but there was a much greater emphasis. That second point, working software over comprehensive documentation, all about getting stuff done. Then the Agile Business Consortium had their 8 principles, Lean have their 7 principles, Scaled Agile Framework have their 9 principles. But what I felt was that we could sort of cut through all these different methodologies and sort of come up with something slightly more independent, methodologically agnostic, if you like. And so that's why I came up with the 5 concepts that, first of all, you don't have to memorize a giant list, but also at senior leadership level, they want something that's business relevant. And people just want to sort of dive into how do we become more agile. So I cut through a lot of the things that these other principles were saying, and things like Scaled Agile Framework talks about unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers and build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles, and build incrementally from firm foundations, and deliver on time and focus on business value. All great stuff. So I basically said, well, there's probably 5 things that you need to look at here. So business need, on-time delivery, iterative approach, evolving solution, and touching all of those was collaboration. And therefore, at the heart of Agile is a roadmap, an iterative incremental plan. And you can see that actually the business need should drive, well, what is the outcome we need from each of these iterations? What does the business need? When does it need it? And of course, by chunking the roadmap up, first of all into iterations and then into waves of getting started, making progress, realizing benefits, a 3-step approach to any iteration, however long, however short, those 3 steps, getting started, making progress, realizing benefits, gives you the outcome. Of course, that's an iterative approach with an evolving solution, supported by collaboration, that one team culture. Those involved in the tangible change are working with those in the business who are changing their ways of working. So those were the core sort of concepts, and the roadmap comes under that. And so what's the difference between the 2 courses, really? The Agile Change Agent, that course is very much the techniques, first and foremost, to establish that iterative incremental plan. So what are the techniques for breaking down? How do we find what the end goal is? That thing sort of almost feels as if it's over the rainbow, but how do we break it down into smaller pieces, individual outcomes? And we're not talking here about just tangible change. We are talking about an outcome which is a shift in the way that we work. So lots of techniques around the breakdown techniques, the understanding of what an outcome is, the prioritization techniques, the identification of benefits, but also, because there is that concept of collaboration, there is as well techniques around relationship building and creating that environment in which people feel reassured, encouraged, motivated to work together in taking that tangible change and starting to adopt it as the new norm, the new way of doing things. So actually, it's all about, there's a lot in there about how we create the plan and how we identify what the outcomes are, the prioritization. Whereas in the Agile Change Coach, what we're saying is, well, actually, we need to lead people through that development and adoption of the new behaviors. So we have a behavioral change life cycle. And of course, we map that to the roadmap, because we're saying for every iteration, we've got to get people on board. It's not as simplistic as it seems here, of course, because some people will get on board quite quickly and others will take a lot longer, and that will roll into other iterations. And we look at how that impacts how we manage things. So the Agile Change Coach course is going to give us the practical techniques for how do I create that interest and awareness, the positivity, participation, etc. So it's all about nudge techniques in the Agile Change Coach course, coaching yourself and others through to adopting new ways of working. Whereas if you're an agent of change, you need to have a plan, you need to be able to identify the benefits, and you need to be able to explain the outcomes, the end goal, how they fit together, how you've prioritized things, and how you've created an environment that supports that agile work. So last couple of minutes, if I have to pull out a few things from the Agile Change Agent, the concepts are in there, the roadmap is in there, but a lot of techniques on defining the end goal, defining the outcomes, describing them, doing that collaboratively. So what activities can you use to get people on board? We do a big exercise on basically you being able to explain the benefits of this iterative incremental approach so you can take others with you. Benefits dependency technique is one of the favorites that comes out of this course. leadership and components of personal leadership, really practical techniques on how you become a very strong magnetic force that other people want to follow you, because an awful lot of change is based on the idea of that intrinsic motivation. Other people have to voluntarily want to follow where you're going. In the Agile Change Coach course, we, of course, still look at the Agile concepts and things, but we particularly look at how we create the iterative change plan and that behavioural change life cycle. And then what we're doing is we've got specific techniques for interest, positivity, participation, resilience, and enjoyment. And one of the things I absolutely love about the course is that as you come towards the end of it, you're starting to think, do you know what? I've got a whole new series of criteria for what goes in a great change plan, a change plan that really makes change happen. So I love the fact that we've got those very practical ways of being able to do things in there. So hopefully that's given you, in the 30 minutes I had, a quick sort of overview of what's going on. As I said, my job in terms of leading sort of on the profession of change management and how we work, I passionately believe that it's the practical techniques that are important. And if you do not have an opinion on Agile, if you do not have an understanding of how to break something down into an iterative incremental plan, then I just don't think that your practice is necessarily fit for the future right now. I think AI is going to be a big determinant of that, but I also think that the high volumes of change we have right now are absolutely driving the need for a more agile way of getting things done. Let's just take a few months, and over those few months, we can shift to a new way of working. Maybe not for every customer, or not for every location, or not for every product or service, but give me a couple of months, we'll prove it works here, and then we can roll it out to the next piece and the next piece. So you having the techniques where you can lead on those conversations, I personally believe makes you more strategically valuable as change practitioners. That's why I'm so behind this idea of agile change.